Hello, good evening on day 73 from our 99 days. I will set up a schedule for the coming weeks again per week like I did before, but today I was a little bit distracted or trying to get into the rhythm here. And actually, I did start a session earlier today in the afternoon, but that kind of was the first time that I really deleted the session, which I only did for like 5 minutes, because I was totally not focused or distracted actually by other things that happened. So here I am again, different subject as well. I want to share about the differences and the big misunderstanding often about empathy, sympathy, sensitivity, and the last one I just call smart skills. I'll explain, of course, everything. Because I've been always very interested in empathy, and I've seen it as a really high value for myself. And I only recently found out how subtle actually and how deep the undercurrent actually under this empathy goes, how difficult it is to show pure empathy and be pure empathic with people or with situations. And it surprised me actually how, whereas I thought I was like this almost very empathic being, I happened actually to still have a lot of neediness underneath, and actually craving to be seen there, and even craving for other people to show empathy towards me, but not from a neutral situation, but actually from a neediness from my side. But first, let me just explain the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is when you hear someone tell a story or you read something in the news and you feel sorry for them. That means that you kind of have this feeling like, oh, poor thing that had happened to you, or this must be awful for them. But there's no real connection to what's actually happening with the other person. There's no really sensing how actually the other person feels. You assume that that person feels bad. You're not even sure the person feels bad. You just make a judgment of the situation, and then you show your sympathy for that situation. But it often comes from your conclusion and your interpretation of the situation, and it doesn't come from empathy. So you actually fill in what's happening, and then you think that you help the other person by sharing that and showing showing the fact that you care. But do you really care? Or is it just merely a way of reacting socially? So the difference then with empathy is that you really are really feeling how that other person feels. So you can literally sense that person's emotions, feelings, that state of whether it's fear or anger or sadness or grief or whatever is happening with that person or that situation. You can really feel that as if it is your own, as if you literally are the same with that other person. And then from that feeling, you can share your empathy, because from that feeling, you can also sense what that other person might need. And sometimes feeling sorry for that person is not what the other person needs. Sometimes it's just being still and hold space for that person is what's needed. Or sometimes a counter reaction might even be needed to get that person out of that state. For instance, if you feel someone is going into a victim role, and if you're really empathic, you can help that person getting out of that victim role by kindly and gently showing actually what's happening. Whereas if you are showing sympathy, behavior, then you're actually just confirming, oh yes, I feel really bad for you. There must be so horrible what you're enduring, etc., etc. But you're not actually helping that person in the moment, because you're not really replacing yourself in the situation of that person from a higher awareness, because that's what really helps then, if you come in with empathy from a higher awareness and can see what the situation actually is like, more from an objective position, you can really help that person with a pure empathic reaction. But often, when we are in this little state of victim, it doesn't have to be a big thing, it can also be you just want to be seen for your story, then we actually want the other person just to see us, and we're actually hoping for empathy. And then when that doesn't show up, or it doesn't show up authentically, we actually feel not seen. So then that person might show sympathy to us, but actually it doesn't do anything, because it doesn't feel like we are really helped. So that's what I actually mean with often the skills people show, especially the persons who are communicative, very smart, and they see themselves as emotionally very intelligent. They can be very clever in reacting to a person's state, but that doesn't necessarily mean they are empathic with that person. They just simply judge the situation, use their communication skills very well, and actually fill in for that person what that person might need, and then actually take over the conversation and kind of lead it in a direction that person with the skills would like. And then the other person who feels bad feels even worse, because he's not seen, or he's not heard, or he's not helped in this situation. So showing real empathy is for many of us really difficult. And if you're not aware, if you are acting in an unaware state or less aware state because you're occupied with your own agenda or with your own things or your own priorities, then you completely miss the other person. You miss what the other person is actually experiencing at that moment. You can't even pick up the signals, because for real empathy, you have to be fully present. It's not about you in that moment, because you're completely involved with what's happening on the other side. So then you can understand that being empathic all the time requires a lot of emptiness within yourself, and a lot of skills to, well, not skills, it requires a really high state of presence, actually, because you have to get yourself out of the way in that situation and just be there and sense what is needed. And I don't know many people who are showing empathy in a really pure way. A lot of people are using it more in a clever way, actually, to show that they care. And for me, that was always like a very difficult one, because you can sense the inauthenticity when someone uses the right words but actually doesn't feel like he really cares. It doesn't feel like he shows really empathy. So I don't know if this subject, empathy or sympathy, is any meaning to you, but if you are open to this, it's really interesting to observe people, how they're actually acting on this topic, and how many people are actually doing it more on a superficial, or more coming from a caring way, but with the ego underneath it, and that there are only really a few people who can do it really well, and very pure and very authentic. And for me, I noticed that when I stepped in a slight victim role, in the sense that I wanted to be seen by someone else, I was actually blaming the other for not showing any empathy. But and of course, the other person could have shown empathy, but what I needed to do is actually show myself instead of asking for attention. I actually had to show up myself, and then the empathy was not really relevant in that moment. Because you only need empathy from the other person when it's sincerely needed there, and when it's really helpful for both, for the situation. But it's not always helpful when someone is in a victim role, to just show that you care, and because you're actually just confirming the state the person is in. And of course, people with high sensitivity on feeling emotions and energies, and state of being with other person, this is really, sorry, someone keeps calling me. Sorry, I have to put out my phone. So when you are highly sensitive on another person's emotions and another person's energy level or state, then that doesn't necessarily mean that you are able to be empathic at the same time, because it's really, really confusing. I'm really, really sorry. It seems that my daughter needs me, so I have to break this off and start all over again later. Okay, she's in pain, so sorry, I have to end this.